We had somebody that did take some images with their smartphone as well, but we also had a professional video camera that we did. So we were able to capture a number of different things that we could then send back. The more the better, because these people aren't able to, the developers were able to be on site to actually do this.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching from. My name is Matt Pierce, host of the Visual Lounge, and we are at Learning DevCamp, and we're on the road making some podcast episodes with some really great people. Some of you have seen before, some not. So today with me, I've got a great guest. We're going to be talking about using video from a practical sense. Sometimes we're making video just because we got to get it out, we're publishing it. But in this case, we're going to be talking about it helping us prepare to do other work. So my guest, Debbie Richards. Debbie, welcome to the Visual Lounge.
Great to see you, Matt.
Oh, it's always great to have you here. So Debbie, you do a lot of consulting work. You're working with a lot of organizations. Tell us a little bit about this idea of practical video, because I know you're doing stuff like you're doing 360 video, you're doing VR stuff, you're doing really cool technology stuff. But, a lot of my audience isn't doing that. They're just trying to do video. So what's this idea about practical video?
So a lot of times you need to use video to have that for the developer. So for example, in VR, we'll start with a 3D model, and the 3D model is this image, and it doesn't have all the realistic views of the actual application. An example is last week I was out on location in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, working on a project, and we had to go out on a job site, and we had to bring back a number of different assets. The first asset was to record the ambient sound in the area, because we want to include that in our VR setting. We want people, when they put on the headset, to hear the sounds on location. And it was everything from the machines operating to a train running by to other things to make that immersive learning more realistic. So we recorded a lot of ambient sounds. We also are doing a walkthrough of this facility. So we actually did that with a video recording. We walked through each floor of the facility, looked at the different pieces of equipment, because in this walkthrough, we're going to be explaining what the equipment is and what it does. And then we also went back through again and we took pictures of all of the equipment. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to have all the imagery, the sound, the video, everything set to the developers who aren't able to come to the local site, but they're going to be able to match up the 3D image with the photography and the video to recreate what we need for our VR simulation. And we used to make sure we got everything we needed. We had a storyboard, we had a checklist to remind them we needed all of this different type of equipment. Now, once we finished that, and we build out this VR simulation, then there will be people at the local site, but also at other locations that will be able to go into VR, and we'll make it as realistic as possible because of everything we've created, all the different components, the 3D model, the videos, and then also all the photography and audio. So,
Well, I love this because I spend so much time thinking about, like, we're going to make an end tutorial video, or we're going to make, produce a highly polished produced video. But I love this idea that you're using video and images to also inform this other work. So you mentioned checklists, you mentioned kind of making sure you've got everything in order. Are there any other pieces of advice you'd give about capturing that kind of practical video? Because, all of us have like a smartphone in our pocket for the most part that does really good quality video, but what advice would you give about using this maybe a little bit better?
Well, there's some other things that we use. Like, we also took a 360 camera with us, and we did a 360 video so that we could, in VR, we could look at that setting in a 360 environment. And it doesn't have to be a fancy camera. I'm not really a video expert, and I have a $400 VR 360 camera, and you're able to, to see everything and visualize it besides taking those square-on shots. We had somebody that did take some images with their smartphone as well, but we also had a professional video camera that we did. So we were able to capture a number of different things that we could then send back. The more the better, because these people aren't able to, the developers were able to be on site to actually do this. And then the other thing that we did that was kind of interesting is we took some shots of people actually doing things with the equipment, because that's the other thing is we could use like, somebody operating a machine or doing something so that the developers could see how that was done.
Yeah.
You could see them turning the switches or turning the equipment. And we're also, if we wanted to, we could use those shots in the VR simulation as well. One of the things I always like to do is to do things the wrong way or to have things that don't belong, because we know we may be able to use that at some point if you're doing a scenario or doing something. So we also had some of those type of things that are included as well. So it's a lot of different things to make sure that you're able to understand that environment. You may use some of that footage to use in parts of other types of training, but the idea is just to get as much as you can using professional equipment, using your standard smartphones, taking lots of pictures, and then just combining all those to get the best experience for the developers to use to create that VR experience.
Well, one thing you said that stood out to me in there was that this idea of capturing people in their environment when they're doing things. We heard in one of the keynote speakers here at this conference was that the idea that, you don't necessarily understand how someone's using it, right? Like maybe they're at a stand-up desk, or maybe they're sitting down, or maybe they're kneeling, or something is different. So I love that it can also inform the other work that we do. So often, and on the show we talk about visuals because it's the visual lounge, but I love this idea of using this to also inform the other materials that you're creating, not just, we're going to make a video, but it's like, because you can learn from it. Or you also see stuff out of place, or maybe you purposely put it there because then that would inform the learner. So I love that.
And there's also, in trying to make something realistic, like on this job site, there's the number of signs. So there are safety signs, there are directional signs, there's all sorts of signs that they use. And we're able to, to capture those signs and include those in the VR simulation as well and make it even more realistic. You could focus in on those signage, it's everything from the PPE, the signage, how the machines operate, all of those things are essential. So it's any number of things that you're going to capture. You're not going to necessarily use all of that video in the simulation, but we need to understand what we need to do to make it realistic. And it's not cost effective to bring the whole team of developers to an on-site location. That in a perfect world, that would be great, but you can't necessarily do that. And then sometimes you're going to need your SMEs that are on that location to just go back and do a quick shot, so that you can add that as well. Another example that I'll give you is I live in Houston. We work with a lot of oil and gas companies, and one of the people that I know is developing a 360 video 3D model to explain some operations on an oil derrick, an offshore oil rig. And so they were able to tell the people, the operators that were out there, what shots they needed, what they just took those with their camera, and then they were able to recreate that for the 3D environment. And they used that to teach the people that were in support organizations like purchasing and other areas about what it was like to be in that environment, because you can't put everybody on a helicopter and take them out to that oil rig as well.
That would have to be a big helicopter. So, well, Debbie, I appreciate you giving this perspective on video, because again, I think just opening up the idea that there's so much we can do with video. It's not all just the end video that matters. It can feed into all of these other processes, whether you're making learning content, you're making marketing content, whatever you're doing, you might need to show these things and get, like you said, getting people on staff to see that, or just using it to build out other assets is really powerful. So thank you for being here. All right, you heard it here. Debbie's going through this stuff as practical video is really important, really powerful. We hope you take some time to find ways to use video beyond what you're doing, just creating tutorials, marketing content, whatever it might be. Take a little time, level up every single day. Thanks, everybody.